Inline skating, or rollerblading, had been an integral part of the X Games since it first launched in Rhode Island in 1995 and introduced millions of people to both street and vert skating for the first time, thanks to the event being broadcast on televisions around the world via ESPN. But in 2004, Inline Street was removed from the Summer X Games and only an AIL vert event was held at X Games 10. A year later, the vert event was also dropped and replaced with an inline vert demo. If you look at the X Games Wikipedia page, there is very little mention of aggressive inline ever being part of the event, and none of the previous medalists are listed. To this day, it's still a sore point for many rollerbladers, and it's regularly mentioned as one of the main reasons for the downfall of the sport in the early 2000s. But why was it dropped in the first place? There are several popular theories regarding this. The first is that it was the result of a smear campaign instigated by the skateboarding industry. The second is that Arlo Eisenberg was somehow responsible for the removal of inline events from the X Games. The third is that rollerblading as a culture began rejecting corporate rollerblading events because the community didn't believe it was an accurate portrayal of the sport. Or was there another reason? First, it's important to understand the historical significance the X Games held for inline skating. The X Games has undeniably had a massive impact on rollerblading as a culture. It was a huge marketing tool in getting a lot of children on inline skates, but that impact worked both ways. The inline boom of the mid-90s contributed hugely to the event's early success. The X Games is responsible for creating multiple stars. Aaron Feinberg won the 1997 edition on his 16th birthday, and it catapulted him to international stardom. He was already known within the inline industry and sponsored by Salomon, who were developing their first skate at the time, but this exposure made him a household name and kickstarted what would become one of the most successful competition careers in blading. He also became one of the highest earning rollerbladers of all time in the process.
Wasn't there a year where you won every stop at the ASA or something like that? And wasn't there some, I don't know, I also heard things like if you won, Solomon would match. So if you win $5,000, Solomon pays you $5,000. So I don't know if all these. I forgot
about that. No, we did have a bonus system in the contract like that. Exactly. And it was for whatever events and we'll match this part or whatever. I can't remember exactly how it was. I was making over $100,000 a year for 4 years. I think at one point I had a few $100,000 in the bank.
The X Games was also responsible for bringing Brazil's Fabiola da Silva to worldwide recognition, and she ended up becoming the most decorated X Games athlete of all time, winning 7 gold medals and 1 silver medal, in addition to countless other podium finishes.
Fabiola da Silva, Sao Paulo, Brazil, dropping in, so easily superior to that of any of her competitors.
Her dominance in the women's event and the dwindling numbers of female competitors led to a new rule being introduced which allowed women to compete with men at the X Games.
The ASA created, is that true, the Fabiola rule that they created?
Yeah. It's because every event that we used to go, that was maybe
Well, explain the Fabiola rule first for people who don't know.
Yeah, the Fabiola rule is we used to have a girls division and guys division on vert skating, but every contest start to get smaller and smaller. One contest was 10 girls, and then the next one was 8, and then 5, 4, and then some contests was 3. And to have a competition with only 3 people, it's kind of, for TV-wise, they say, it's not very nice. So they decided to launch women with guys to see if they could motivate the women more. Mm-hmm. But man, a lot of them, they just either stopped or got unmotivated. Instead of being motivated, I was like, man, if I can be top 10, I'm going to try.
Yeah.
I was excited because I wanted to push myself. But a lot of women, they think women are not capable to skate as good as a guy. Mm-hmm. Of course, some tricks, okay, but I think we are capable to be as good as a guy.
Definitely.
So
you definitely proved that over the years, too.
Tai-chrest won the 2001 vert event with a flawless run that included both switch and natural spins and a double backflip, a trick which he landed multiple times throughout his career. The Algerian-born blader then went on to become a celebrity in France, appearing in multiple television shows, including Dancing with the Stars, Survivor, The Amazing Race, Starfloor, Extreme Adventure, and The Tai Show. He was immortalized as a video game character in Aggressive Inline and appeared in multiple television adverts. He is also responsible for 2 world record attempts, which included jumping off the Eiffel Tower and the Guinness World Record for longest jump, both of which have been heavily criticized by the inline community.
Hello, Guinness Book of World Records. How can I help you today?
Hi, I was just calling to submit a record for the longest shopping cart jump.
Shopping cart?
Yeah, shopping cart. Just real quick, do you have to land it for it to count?
Yeah, you have to land it.
However, less than a decade after being included in the X Games, the inline skating events were dropped from the competition schedule. One theory is that it was the result of growing anti-rollerblading sentiment which was being promoted by the skateboarding industry. Big Brother magazine was particularly effective at this, mocking skaters in their print edition and in the videos Boob and Crap.
We were invited to come to the first X Games, and I don't think many of us were ready for it. And I came from a skateboard background, and I remember getting off the tour bus, coming into the dorms, and walking into the lobby and seeing Danny Way and Tuss Buffus, these guys, you know, as a little skateboard dude, looked up to them, you know, and I remember them just drilling us. The first time I ever heard anyone called a FUBU was right then.
This propaganda even found its way into mainstream culture, with comedians getting in on the joke.
I was once on Venice Beach and I'm jogging, and there's this guy rollerblading towards me. He's just rollerblading like... I'm free. And I actually had to stop jogging because I needed my whole body to fucking hate this guy with. I had to just...
And Hollywood movies also took aim at inline skaters.
Come on, fall down. Whoa, fall down, yes. Oh, come on, damn it. You suck, you suck, you suck. Check this out.
And then one of our students wore rollerblades for show and tell.
Yeah.
And Jillian tripped him with a stick.
I've never...
Jackass was also a fan of making fun of rollerbladers, but this comes as no surprise because the series was created by former Big Brother magazine editor Jeff Tremaine. And possibly the most famous joke of all, the Aziz Ansari sketch for Human Giant, "What's the hardest part about rollerblading?" Interestingly, this viral video has now been removed from YouTube. Another reason cited for the removal of aggressive inline from the X Games is a rumour that started online from within our own culture. Arlo Eisenberg, one of the sport's most recognisable figures and the founder of blading's most influential brand, Senate, has regularly been criticised for not preventing inline being removed from the event. This conspiracy theory has in part been unwittingly fueled by Arlo, who was a commentator for ESPN up until inline's expulsion from the X Games, with a story he told in the 2006 documentary Barely Dead.
I've been announcing the X Games, okay? I go and I do the play-by-play for the TV broadcast with Mark Shays. And every year before we go to the X Games, they have what they call a talent meeting. We go into the conference room and the guy, Rich Feinberg, the producer, says, listen, I had my staff put together this video of highlights from last year's X Games. I think it's really great and I think it's gonna get everyone fired up. They puts in the tape, turns down the lights, and they never show rollerblading. We're part of this staff, we're part of the X Games. Rollerblading hadn't been dropped yet. And Rich goes on with the presentation, he's talking about this stuff, he's talking about the new technology. And he says, we've got some really great new technology this year. We're gonna have the cable cam coming over the whole street course. And he's talking about the different things, and he says, and we're going to do something new this year that we've never done before. He said, so we're gonna have a follow cam to show on the street course. He said, but I gotta tell you guys, he's now talking to the whole room, he said, I gotta tell you guys, we tried everything. We thought about a lot of different ways to get this, and it just so happens that the best way to get the footage is by having an inliner on the course. Just so you know, skateboarders, he's talking to the skateboarding commentators, you know there's going to be an inliner out there, just so you know, bike riders. And basically, he's apologizing for the fact that there's going to be an inliner on the course. They all had a big laugh about it. I didn't think it was funny. And then half a year later, 6 months later, I get an email from ESPN. One line basically says, we've decided to go in another direction.
This story led many to believe that Arlo, who most people consider the face of aggressive inline, didn't do enough to stop skating from being dropped from the event.
If you'd like to have any comments, if you'd like to say that I ruined rollerblading or that I got rollerblading kicked out of the X Games or that I'm just a bad look for rollerblading, leave your comments below.
We'd love to hear them.
Do you get a lot of that? I feel like you're like one of the guys that's like a nothing but, like, do you get much hate?
Well, you've never been on BMAG. Or you were never on BMAG or Roller News back in the day.
Sure.
And people straight would blame you for that, for X Games.
I definitely get my detractors, but yeah.
It turns out there was more to this story, which Arlo elaborated on during his appearance on the Powell Movement podcast in 2017.
My protest was, I'm going to get up and walk out. That's what I'm going to do. That was the first thing that came to mind. So I stood up and I walked out. Take that, Rich Feinberg. So I leave the room and I'm standing out there. I don't know what to do. I go to the bathroom. Splash some water on my face. So after taking a moment to compose myself, I go back to the room where the conference is and sit down and realize that my big protest just looked like I got up to use the restroom. Right? No one noticed anything. I just got up and went to the restroom for all anyone else knows. Not much of a protest. And so I'm like, okay, Arlo, you still got to do something. Like that obviously wasn't the trick. So now I pick up the newspaper and I turn my back to Rich. I turn away from the center of the meeting. I turn away from the table and I pick up the newspaper and I hold it up high and I pretend like I'm reading the newspaper. So now it's a very blatant sign of discontent or malcontent. I'm being insubordinate. So this one is unmistakable. So he says, Arlo, don't you think you should be paying attention to the meeting? So he took the bait and he set me up, right?
Yep.
He gave me just the entrance that I was looking for. Now I get to give my big virtuous FU speech.
No stopping you.
No stopping me. I'm on the roller coaster now and it's barreling downhill. So I said, Rich, I come here every year and I do the broadcast and I do the play-by-play or whatever I do, the color commentary. And I said, but I'm not here because my dream was to be a broadcaster on TV. I said, I'm here because I love what I do. I love rollerblading. I'm here to celebrate that, to bring it to people. And I said, and you just showed this video of all the highlights from last year, and there was not a single mention of rollerblading. There was no acknowledgement that we were even a part of the X Games last year. I said, that is an insult to me and to rollerblading. I just find that offensive. Now in my big grandiose speech to him, I say, and the first time you mentioned rollerblading, you're apologizing for it. You're embarrassed. He said, I'm sorry if that's how it came off. He said, I don't think that's how I presented it at all. And he said, but we can talk about this after the meeting. And I said, okay. So then he went on with the rest of the meeting. I was still sort of fuming. And then after the meeting, I left. I didn't stay to talk to him. I kind of had said my piece, and I just wasn't interested in what he had to say.
Years before inline was dropped from the X Games, rollerblading as a culture had already begun to reject the way events like the X Games represented the sport, with some of the most influential athletes in the culture denouncing corporate, national and international events. In the 1998 Medium video, Smell the Glove, Brian Shima can be seen burning his ASA amateur trophy. In the One Love Rolling documentary from 1999, several of street skating's most popular icons at the time vocalized their frustrations with competitions, including Arlo Eisenberg, Josh Petty, Eric Shrine, and Louis Zamora.
A lot of people are exposed to our sport through TV and through competitions. Well, competitions aren't a 100% accurate representation of what we do. You don't really get a feeling for the culture and the lifestyle and all the things that happen, all the things that make rollerblading great beyond just the pure athleticism.
Unfortunately, they are a part of being a pro skater. I'd love it if I could say like competitions didn't matter, whatever you get. Right now, until we have more completely skater-owned companies who don't care, then competitions won't be such an essential part of being a pro skater. our sport, unfortunately, is so like based on contests. You know what I mean? If contests were gone, then I guess people would say it's dead, but it's not.
The competition here and there isn't bad, you know, but I mean, you have kids at the skate park just training, you know, so they can win the next ASA, so they can make it pro, you know, and that's not what skating's about at all.
Vert skating legend Renee Hallgren, who was no stranger to the podium at these types of events, was also not a fan of the X Games. In fact, rollerblading actually started setting up its own grassroots events to offer a more accurate portrayal of skating. John Julio launched the IMYTA, I Match Your Trick Association, with Mike Wilson and Ezequiel Anderson, a real street event that took place in major cities across America and Europe. In fact, the first event was held outside the X Games in San Francisco in August 2000.
That year,
like,
X Games did have rollerblading in it.
Okay.
It did have rollerblading. And that year, I got kicked off the vert ramp because I wasn't allowed to film. And I don't know. That wasn't the reason why we did the street contest, but I was just like, it gave me even more like rebellious, you know? I was like, oh, kick me out the vert. I skate, man. I'm part of the.
Yeah,
I'm competing.
You're competing, yeah.
And they're like, no. And then the camera guy was such a dick to me, I remember. And anyway, we had blading. I think Aaron Feinberg might have won that year. But
you did it like adjacent to the
yeah,
event. Okay.
Yeah.
It's all about rushing and getting the job done. And getting the competition done, more importantly. This is where the crowd went crazy. This is where I was like high on life.
This is where the goosebumps set in?
Exactly.
Pain.
What we're gonna do is, they normally come out the top. So what I need you to do is, when they start to come out the top, I need you to like put your foot and hold the door shut. Don't let them come out.
And not letting the man beat us.
Exactly.
Right.
And not getting caught by the cops.
The X Games' official explanation for dropping aggressive inline from its schedule was outlined in a press release in March 2005, claiming that a variety of factors, including the sport's progression, live television demands, demographics of our viewers, and on-site fans, were considered, and domestically, this sport isn't growing at the rate of our other sports. It is still a strong sport in other countries around the world, which is why you will see both a vert and park competition featured at our international events. As a result, inline competitions did continue to be held at partner events, Asian X Games and Latin X Games. These reasons were also offered by Jason Hines, who previously worked at the aggressive inline events at the X Games up until the event was discontinued during his appearance on the Powell Movement podcast.
We just weren't needed. And if we're not there, then the amount of savings that they're going to get off of all of that is going to be so much more. We got to the point where we were expendable because we didn't have a big enough chunk of what we drove for us being there. You cancel skateboarding, you lose Tony Hawk, you lose Bucky Lasek, you lose Ryan Sheckler, you lose, later on, Paul Rodriguez, and even after that, Nigel Houston. Like, those are big losses that actually can be tangible to see what you lose there. If you cancel BMX, you lose the biggest wow factor that you have, because doing all that stuff with a heavy ass bike between your legs is just super impressive. You lose motocross, you lose the motor. You lose that connection to that consumer. Whereas inline, we were expendable. As sports grow up, you have growing pains. You have different things that come to the forefront. You have different exposure. You have all of those different things. So because of that happening, our sport was the one that was looked at like we couldn't behave. And then that stigma stuck with it We were that kid that was looking to be put to the side. We were basically, we were profiled from the beginning.
Jason also kindly offered to elaborate on these comments for the sake of this video and points to several contributing factors and the way the sport conducted itself during the first couple of years of the X Games for its eventual dismissal.
We had some things that were happening good, but we weren't progressing at the level that was needed at that sweet spot, like the 96, 97. We weren't, it wasn't like the sport was taking leaps and bounds. And the surprise thing that came out of it was that from skateboard vert and BMX vert were a lot bigger than what they saw. BMX park was absolutely insane. Skateboard street didn't come until its own until they started giving them the proper courses. You know, it's not even cutting down what they were riding back then. They were basically having to ride what everybody else was, which wasn't really for what they needed. So they had some standouts and everything, but it wasn't until later on. But from skateboard vert, they were able to be carried, like the skateboard vert was able to carry, you know, so much. And then going into that crucial period from the 90s, you know, the time when we needed to really show that our sport was maturing, we were actually having younger and younger and younger people that were in there. We were having younger people go in. We were trying to find our own, just our own style and everything. And the unfortunate thing was that our own style was gigantic jeans, clothes that were way too big, you know, just everything that just really didn't fit the part for where the X Games was trying to look for these heroes. We got a little bit loose with just people, you know, bailing out on runs, not really caring. Everyone had contracts in hand. The winnings from the X Games and things, there were a few, like there were skaters that took it serious, but not everyone.
Yeah.
And then, you know, the year that Travis Pastrana made his debut, and the first year they did freestyle in San Francisco, was also the year that we just had all sorts of crazy shenanigans happen with us. They were having us do vert triples and all of these different things. It was so weird.
Yeah.
And that was the year that Tony Hawk landed the 900.
Okay.
You know, and at the same time, Nicky Adams, arguably, you know, like just, you know, one of the people that for X Games behind the scenes, they're just like, this kid's just always really, you know, just he was, you know, Nicky was just, he used to stir it up back then. It was just like the perfect storm of everything going wrong happened at that time. And if we look back at coulda, shoulda, woulda, we needed to just really try to mature our sport a lot faster and just kind of take it more serious from a business sense and take the reins of it.
Although he also concedes that the resentment from the skateboarding industry and its continuous attempts to undermine and ridicule rollerblading also had a considerable effect.
That was, I mean, that was the leading edge of it. It really was. It wasn't necessarily the smear campaign of like the homophobic and everything like that. Like that was a big part of it. It was in the 90s, we as a society were absolutely horrible. We just didn't understand what we were doing when things like that were okay. And I look back on it now and absolutely cringe for the way that it was. The big thing about it from a skateboard standpoint was they had the power. We had the power in the beginning. You know, we had Chris Edwards and Arlo and these people and these heroes that were already made within this rollerblading universe. But then the story of Tony Hawk it transcended. The story of Hoffman transcended. The story of Dave Mira, Dennis McCoy, you know, all of these people from within each of these sports transcended. And as they gained power, there was a jealousy. We were brand new. And the very first X Games took place in 93. I want to say the first rail grind was, you know, like Chris Edwards was just celebrating. I think was it 91 or something? Like, you know?
It was very, very fresh by that point. Yeah.
Very fresh. You know, it was basically like, you know, we're celebrating the first rail grind at Frankie's event was that week. So it was in November. It was like, you know, 91. We were fresh to it. So it was something that the target being on our back was massive, just showing up, like just knocking on the door. They open the door, like, who are you? We're rollerblading. They're like, oh, you know, like just from the start.
Interestingly, in the last 12 months, the official X Games YouTube channel has posted multiple videos about its previous aggressive inline events, with one video clocking up over 284,000 views. The channel also created a poll last year asking which events fans would like to see return, and aggressive inline came out on top with 57% of the votes. Would you like to see rollerblading return to the X Games? Let me know in the comments below.